Good morning. Welcome to Every Citizen Armed, episode number 3. Today we're going to have Dustin Pitcher. He is the owner of Dirty Bird Guns and Ammo here in Bakersfield, California. We had a really good conversation. I'm pretty excited about what he had to say. He has a great story. I think all of you are going to really enjoy it a lot. And we'll get to it right after this. First, we're going to talk a little bit about Vince Ritchie. He's down in LA, and I'm probably saying that name wrong, but he was actually a guy who concealed carry owner, and he was almost robbed in a home invasion robbery. 2 guys tried to break into his house when he came home from the gym. Luckily for him, one was a little farther away. The guy coming up on him, he had a cup of hot tea in his hand. He was able to use that to hit the guy with it, distract him enough so he could pull his own firearm. He was, at that point, they were going to shoot him. He shot at them. They fired a few rounds at him and took off running over the fence. But here's just another case of where having a homeowner who actually owns a firearm, is doing it legally, doing the things right, and be responsible. He had an opportunity to use his firearm, but also whatever is in your hand is something that could truly be a weapon. Understand anything around you. Take care of yourself. This particular homeowner actually got in trouble with the LAPD, which seems kind of ridiculous when he's the one who is being responsible. I would really recommend folks take a look into that case and understand what these, DAs down like Gascon in LA are doing to folks. It's really hard on the gun owners, and they're really making it difficult for homeowners to really protect themselves. But with that, we're going to move on, and we'll start with the episode. Hope everybody has a great day and enjoy this.
Every Citizen Armed ensures that every American patriot is prepped with knowledge, perspective, and firepower.
He counted on America to be passive. He counted wrong.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Hey, Dustin, we appreciate you coming by with us today. Dustin is the owner of Dirty Bird Sports and Guns and Ammo, right? I want to make sure I say that properly. We wanted to bring you in today, kind of talk about some of the few things, and I've got a little list here. But first off, I really would like you to kind of go through your story. Talk a little bit about what you do, how you got into it. I mean, local guy, local business. I think that's very important in our community. So would you mind kind of giving us your story a little bit?
Yeah, when you called me, I was like, Chuck Sears, I know that name, and I know you guys were one of the first people in the store when it opened, the storefront.
Yeah, we were.
And so, yeah, we go back, though, all the way to 2016-ish, 2016, 2017, when we really got going, and basically we started online. A buddy of mine, my background is in marketing and advertising. Okay, so I was the general manager of a marketing agency here in town, the Marcom Group. Shout out Dave Plivlich. He hosts a podcast of his own. But I ran that agency for almost 10 years. And during that time, one of my best friends, Travis, I just had him on. He was one of the guys I had on Monday with me on the Terry Maxwell show. Nice. So he was into guns, but he didn't have an AR-15. And so the Sandy Hook happened around that time. And I don't know if you guys remember, but ARs dried up. I mean, you could not get a factory AR. They were on, super back order. And so he was looking into it and saw that a lot of folks build their own ARs. It's a very popular way to get an AR. You build it yourself. It's kind of like an erector set or something like that. It's very modular because it's very standardized. So when you have things that are standardized like that and all these different manufacturers that make, so you've got an AR barrel. Okay, well, you got a ton of different profiles, lengths, you got different gas systems, but they all have the same barrel extension. They all index with the same style of upper receiver. And so you get a lot of flexibility. So he got into that. He bought a lower and then started acquiring parts online. Around that time, he had met, I think his name is Chris Cook. He was doing polymer 80% lowers. Okay, so there were 80% lowers, which is basically an AR lower that's aluminum, and you got to mill out the fire control pocket and drill some holes. It's 80% done, right?
Okay, gotcha.
And so because for the longest time, there was nothing on the books saying that you couldn't make your own firearm. The Second Amendment covered your ability to manufacture your own gun. And so people were doing 80% lowers, handy guys who were handy. Now they actually had jigs too. So you can
I do remember that.
So you can get a lower, you can get a jig. Well, Chris Cook started injection molding 80% lowers out of polymer. Now they weren't great, but they were easy to use, and you could finish one with a Dremel.
Yeah.
And they were cheap to make.
Was this when was this? 16, 17?
Yeah, it would have been around that time.
Okay.
This might have been 15. This might have been around 2015. I do not sure. It was, maybe a year after Sandy Hook or something like that.
Okay.
I don't know when that was, but so he started selling them on Amazon. So he made a deal with Chris Cook. He was buying these 10 packs, 20 packs of these polymer lowers, and he was selling them on Amazon as paperweights. Right? Because Amazon's anti-gun.
Great idea.
And so it was hilarious. So he'd make a listing, right? And they'd take it down, and he'd make another listing, take some new pictures. He'd put a flower in the mag well, and, with some pens and pencils. And pretty soon, they were playing whack-a-mole with his listings. Sure. And pretty soon, he was doing pretty good with them too, because they were very popular. But pretty soon, Amazon froze his account. He couldn't make any more listings, and they reached out to him, and they stopped making deposits into his bank account. And so they had, they owed him about $18,000, I think it was at the time. And they're like, if you create another account, if you do another listing, we're going to freeze your funds indefinitely next time. And so he came to me. I'm kind of a programmer by trade. And I have a marketing background. So he's like, I got this deal on these lowers. I'm doing well with them, but I can't list them on Amazon anymore. And I was like, well, let me do a brand for you. I'll do a logo. So he had come up with APOC Armory. So I did a logo for him, built him a website, and he's like my best friend. So I didn't really expect anything in return. And, but he had given me, I think a 5% stake in the company or something like that. And so, we launched the site. We figure out marketing on this website, Gun Deals. At the time, it was called Slick Guns, but they got sued by Slick Deals, which was a deal website.
Gotcha.
And so they changed it to Gun.Deals. This site's still around today. We still do a lot of marketing with them. And so we started super basic. We're doing those polymer 80s and then doing some complete uppers. Complete uppers are real popular. And so just kind of sourcing barrels. He learned how to build really good uppers. And we started basically in his garage at the time, and he was shipping out. And then we got a little bigger, and he for a while, he was working out of a storage unit.
Was that here local?
It was here locally,
okay.
Yeah. And so, I'd pull up into the, you punch in the code to get into the storage unit, and he's there. He's got power run. I think one of the guys that managed it, he had sold an upper or a build kit to or something like that. And so he ran an extension cord for him over to the
you think of how sketchy that could really look at somebody driving by and seeing that. And
yeah, they're just parts,
Right.
So it's like there weren't any complete guns. We didn't have an FFL. We weren't dealing with complete, we didn't finish any lowers for anybody, so there was nothing illegal about it at all. But, and then he leased a little flex industrial space, maybe 1,800 square feet, 1,500 square feet or something like that. And we got up to pretty quickly doing like 6 figures a month in sales. And I was still working at Marcom, and he decided that he wanted to buy me out. He's like, why don't I just buy you out? And I was like, that's fine. Because I didn't really,
right.
I did it as a friend. I'm his buddy, right? And so he's like, I registered this domain called ar15discounts.com. He's like, I'll give you that. I'll give you some inventory, and you can do your own thing. And I was like, okay, cool. So I took ar15discounts.com, and I built a little website. I already started something actually for him on it, but so I finished out the website. And at the time, my mom wasn't doing anything, so I was like, oh, she can fill orders. So set her up in a spare bedroom in my brother's house. So we've got it's about a room this size and just shelves everywhere, boxes, buying 100 parts kits, lower parts kits at a time. So we did a lot of lower parts kits, a lot of stripped upper receivers. And we just kind of grew the AR-15 discounts business from there. My brother, I got him into Cerakoting because one of the things we wanted, we were very much it's ar15discounts.com, right? So we're budget. And so we're trying to figure out how to build lowers, good quality lowers, but as cheap as possible. And so part of that was we were buying handguards, 100 at a time from China, right? And so the metal work, the machine work was good, the aluminum was good, but the anodizing was terrible. You sneeze on these things, the anodizing blows right off. And so I was like, Jay, let's Cerakote these, which Cerakote's a better than anodizing anyway. And I was like, Jay, if you learn how to Cerakote, you could do, like 100 of these. The little company we're starting will pay you like $20 each for them or whatever, and you can start your own thing. And you can do them for Travis too, because at that point, Travis was needing some Cerakote work too. And so my brother's and he's my business partner now. I'll get to that, but very industrious. Okay. He went to performance automotive school. He's been a machinist. He's been a CNC operator. He's real good with pretty much anything mechanical. And so he got going doing that, and he started doing some Cerakote, and he got his FFL.
Okay, that's when that kind of came about. That makes sense.
Yes. And then at one point, so there were two separate companies, whatever, 15. And at one point, we were both working, and it was too much work to kind of keep things separate. And I'm like, look, let's do this. We'll just combine everything. So I formed an LLC, Dirty Bird Industries LLC.
Okay.
We put all the DBAs under that, and then we just, started getting it. And once we got to a point where we were we had no more space in his house. Garage was full. The spare bedroom was full. We decided to lease. You guys know where the shop is. That's where we started as suite number 200. It used to be a gunsmith that was there for years, actually. So that's why it had like the extra cage door thing, because that's a requirement for FFLs. But so we leased that, and that was right. I found that because I don't know if you guys remember, there used to be Matt Baker had a jiu-jitsu studio, so that's how I found it, because I was training there. And Milton George Bachman leased it to us, and then that's when I quit my day job. So that was a big leap. And for you guys or any entrepreneur knows, especially if you got a family, I have a comfortable income. I've got health insurance for my wife and kids. And so, big shout out to my wife, Kate, to take a pay cut like that and like throw it on, like, 'cause I didn't have a ton saved up. You know what I mean? I was making okay money, but you have to do really, really well, unless you're super frugal, which I am not. And so you have to do really, really well to be able to save up money. And so, I was like, babe, I think we can make this work. I said, but I got to go 2 feet in. I can't, now's the time. I need to be there all day, every day, basically trying to grow this thing. And so she's like, yeah, do it. And so, you go from being comfortable, and then now she's at, DHS getting food stamps, because we're leaning on all the government programs we can to subsidize the business, which is what you have to do. I mean, if you're truly, shoestring, bootstrap, you're doing everything you can to pay the bills until you can meet critical mass, And so, I went from making good money. I started paying myself $400 a week. Kate went down and you got to see it from her perspective too. I mean, that's, you can't help but your pride to take a hit on that.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's why I always tell people, I mean, it was such a sacrifice. It's not I don't know if you've ever been to the DHS downtown. Like, it's not a pleasant place to be.
It's certainly not. No.
Okay. There's unsavory characters there. Yeah. And it's just, the wait times are long. It's like the DMV, but worse. And so, but she was a real trooper. We got through that hard time, and I was able to grow it pretty quickly. I had a marketing back. It was kind of the perfect storm. I knew web development. I knew how to build a good e-commerce site that converted a high percentage of the users. I knew SEO. I knew marketing, customer service. When I was 18, I started in the car business. So sales and marketing was kind of, by the grace of God, I had the background needed to kind of get this thing off the ground quickly. So pretty soon we rented the suite next to us. And, we kind of opened up a hole in the wall, and, we're building racks, and we're increasing our inventory, and it's me and my brother and my mom. And, mom's a trooper too. She, she was there all the time, shipping orders. We wrote handwritten notes on every single order. And we were having a blast with it. It ended up being a really cool thing to share with your family.
I think it actually builds a legacy is when I listen to that, it's the family and it's that stuff that's going to be talked about in your family 40, 50, 60 years from now, because it speaks extremely highly of your wife to be able to jump into that.
Yeah. And at this time, the market was stagnant. And so the big run on AR, and this is kind of the gun business in general, but especially AR stuff, is it's very up and down. So, when people get nervous, like basically thinking they're going to come ban ARs or take the guns, that's when people start buying them. It's like clockwork. I think when we went to SHOT Show one year, I had business cards made up and I put like a silhouette. I put like a, kind of an isolated photo of Barack Obama on the front with like salesman of the year on it. Because he's, he was doing so good for everybody in the industry. And so, but as a whole, during a lot of that period, we were stagnant. So we were also lucky that we were bootstrapped. We didn't have a lot of expense. So I was able to reinvest pretty much everything in inventory. From an e-commerce perspective, that's the goal, is you've got to expand your product base. You got to identify products and brands, and there's no shortage of AR parts. I mean, it's insane the number. I mean, safety selectors. We've probably got 100 different varieties of safety selectors alone, and then a bunch of those come in different colors.
Yeah, so you've got to have.
It's insane. And so, trying to be tactical about what you pick to bring in, and so we're trying to get better pricing with everybody. That's the name of the game. So we're trying to send big POs to people. We're trying to get distributor level relationships. And we were able to grow pretty quick. We went, we hired our first employee shortly after that. And then, within 2 years, we were up to 25 employees, doing, gosh, at that time, I'm trying to think pre-pandemic, because pandemic just put everything on steroids. But, we were doing at least 500 orders a day. Wow. And during this time, we had Milt and George really wanted us to buy the building. And so they gave us a good deal on that building. We were nervous about buying it, but turns out it was a good decision. We did it. So by the time we ended up needing to expand, we had all but I think one suite filled. All the walls, all the partition walls were taken down, and there were just racks. So it was like a little Amazon. You would have no idea if you went into that parking lot. Like, you wouldn't know what was going on there. We didn't have signs up. We weren't open to the public, but you'd see the USPS truck pulling up and just shoveling back, huge bins of packages in there. And some people put two and two together, and they would see the return address. So you'd have people in Bakersfield buying parts, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's on Mohawk Street." Yeah. And then they'd show up, and then you could always tell, because they're, if you've been there, it's like they're little suites, so there's a lot of different doors.
Yes.
And so they're going from one to one, like looking in, trying to see, like, are there people here? Like, what's going on? And so eventually, though, we had also leased the old Trends building. But long story short, we got too big, and we needed more space. And so warehouse operations require a lot of space, and we didn't want to expand in California. We didn't want to add to California because of the regulatory environment.
Yeah, they don't make it easy.
No. And so Jay and I went and visited a couple places, and we decided on North Carolina. And so he's out there to this day running that, and we leased a 50,000 square foot warehouse out there.
Wow.
This is 2021. So this is coming out of the real run from COVID. And so, I mean, COVID boosted us in terms of business so much, and we were in a good position to capitalize on that additional business because we had good processes. I'm very much a processes and systems guy, and so we had a fairly modern warehouse fulfillment system. I did overkill in the beginning. Like, I was spending more money on software, business software, than and an ERP, enterprise resource planner, than most companies that size would. Most companies that size wouldn't even think about paying that amount of money for a software. But, the way I saw it, I was like, either we're going to get big enough to grow into this software, or I'm not going to do it anymore. I mean,
Yeah, you got to plan for where you're going to be, not where you're at. I want to see where I'm going to be in 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And so, I think in January of 21, we did like $3 million in sales.
Wow.
Which was more than double the previous year. And so we had been doing pretty good, but it went completely insane. And the margins were high because you couldn't get parts anywhere, but we were pretty good about purchasing and planning and forecasting. And so we had parts, but the margins were good, because in times like, especially like right now, you can buy BCGs for $49, and that's what we're putting BCGs on sale for $49. Back at that time, we were paying a little bit more for wholesale, but we were selling them for minimum $80, $90. Right. And so the margins are outstanding on that. And so around July 2021 is when we made the move into that facility in North Carolina. And that was a big risk. I mean, and then it was expensive. It was very, very expensive.
Well, that's a long haul.
Yeah.
Your brother took a big chance moving all the way out there too.
He did, yeah. But he's done incredibly well out there. He's killing it all the time. I haven't had to go back since I spent 30 days there getting the warehouse set up. And since then, it was outside of Raleigh. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Raleigh area, but it has blown up. So that's actually why I didn't move out there, is because of the property expenses. We were going to move everything. We were just going to pick up and move. We were relocating. We were paying to relocate any of the employees that wanted to. So that's expensive.
Yep.
But we couldn't, I couldn't find a place that would fit my family. And I had horses. My daughter was a bale racer, and it became evident. And plus the property, we, naively, thought we were going to be saving money moving out there. And it just didn't work out like that. I mean, it was literally, properties were pretty much just as expensive as here in California, in Bakersfield. It wasn't coastal prices, but still like way more expensive than you'd think it would be.
You see that a lot of folks, they go, I'm just going to move out of here. But there's a reason we all live here. I mean, it's like we met briefly the other day, but the weather, the property, the people. Bakersfield's great with having the people. I mean, the people around here are awesome. So I like that a lot. Is this about when you led into the retail side of it?
So yeah, that's what prompted me to open up the store. And so we I talked to Kate. I was like, babe, we don't have to move. We didn't want to uproot, or I've got 5 kids. I didn't want to uproot them out of schools and stuff like that. And so, and then it occurred to me, what was funny is we were going to lease out because we owned the building here still. Right. And so I was looking to find someone to lease. And ideally I was like, we had built a test fire room. We had just got done building a test fire room. We had the whole armory built out. And if I haven't taken you guys back there, I'll show you. We're certified Cerakote applicators. So we have a huge walk-in spray booth installed, with all the electrical and ventilation that requires. And so it was set up not with a showroom, but with everything else you would want to run a pretty nice gun store. And a friend of mine, still a friend of mine, he still owns a shop. He lives in Texas now, but he still owns a place. And I was giving him the walkthrough. I said, hey, come down here. I was like, we're moving. I need to lease this place out. And I took him, unit by unit. And I was like, hey, and I was like, I have a Cerakote applicator you can hire. And so I'm giving him this pitch. I'm like, you're right across the street from Turner's. I know that doesn't seem good, but that's awesome. You hang a banner up there. And I'm giving him a vision. And so, and I gave him a price on the lease, with the tenant improvements and stuff like that. And it just wasn't in the cards for him. He was doing okay where he was. And I was like, after that, I started thinking, I was like, I should do that. We already have the FFL. All I need to do, we took basically 2 warehouses, polished the concrete, put in some display cases, hung some flags. HVAC isn't cheap to put in, but, so, I mean, it was, less than $100,000 to get that whole showroom done, replace one of the roll-up doors with a glass frontage. And, you guys have been in there. You walk in and you're not sure what to expect. It's pretty big. But, and so yeah, so I was like, babe, I'll just open up a store. And I didn't expect it to get as big as it's gotten. But as you guys know, if it's gotten fairly busy.
Well, like I said, we walked in there probably not long after you opened up. As soon as we heard you were opening up a retail, we went in there, and then I walked in again the other day, of course. But we've been in quite a few times in the process. And to think about what it was like back then, and where you're at now, is extremely impressive to see. I mean, I was watching your employees the other day, and you just got a great staff.
Thank you.
That's what was
and
impressive. And it's coming from, like I said, I've owned my own businesses in the past, and I always evaluate staff. No matter when I walk in, I sit off to the side and I watch. That's kind of what we do. And I was just really impressed watching your team and how quickly they came to me to see if I needed help, but also watching them. They took care of everybody in there. You just don't see that nowadays, unfortunately. So, I mean, you've done a great job with that. I think that needs to be highlighted a little bit. So,
yeah, thanks. And you know, they're a good crew. We are very customer focused. We get good feedback on that a lot. You know, there's long wait times. It takes a long time to do a background check on a gun. We got to do background check on ammo. If someone's buying a 50 round box of 9mm, I gotta, you know, it takes so much time to do that. So it bogs us down. And so, you know, I always apologize. I'm like, I'm sorry about the wait, you know, but we now have an appointment system for people to do background. So if they buy the gun, they can set an appointment to come back, kind of like DMV. You can walk in and wait, or you can set an appointment and wait less.
this episode is brought to you by Inspired Digital. Inspired Digital is a website design and online marketing agency. They can help you improve your online presence, and while doing this, help generate more revenue and prospects for your company. Go to www.inspireddigital.com. We really appreciate their support for Every Citizen Armed podcast and the Second Amendment. Well, there are a lot of different laws and regulations that came into place when you went into retail away from what you were shipping there, but now you're in retail. That's got to change things a little bit. What type of new rules and laws did you have to jump behind to get to when you did that?
Most of the customer-facing regulations, so, filling out the paperwork, doing 4473s, that's a huge part of it. Making sure that everyone that works there has to have their COE, which is a certificate of eligibility. That's basically a federal background check. Anybody can get a COE. Some folks don't know this, but you can, in California, you can't have ammo shipped to your house. Now, that is a great thing for us. Okay, so that, I don't believe in it. I fully support getting rid of that, but from a business standpoint, it's great for us. But you can go out and get a COE. You got to renew it every year. It costs $60. But if you have a COE, you can have ammo shipped to your house. You can also walk into an ammo store and buy it without a background check, because the COE is a federal background check. It's fingerprinted. You get a live scan. You do it at UPS, the UPS store. And so, so there's the paperwork aspect of it. There's the tracking of the guns. Now, some of this we were already doing because we were into selling lower receivers, but we weren't into complete firearms. We had the luxury initially of having enough capital. We were able to stock that place pretty good. And we were able to come right out of the gate with a good selection of firearms and stuff like that. And so I think that was an advantage that we had over some of the other gun stores that kind of had a hard time finding their footing here in town. There was a shop that seemed nice to me at Bakersfield Guns and Ammo over there by Cigars and More, where the Hooters used to be.
Yeah, exactly.
But, they didn't have much of a selection, and, you can't, it's not like a car dealership where you floor the vehicles, and they're all kind of on, you got to buy them to have them in stock. And so, and I know Turner's across the street, from what I understand, a lot of their stuff, like you look at it, you handle it. Oh yeah, I want one of these. Okay, it'll be here in a couple of days.
Right.
They get it from their distribution center. And so us having a much larger selection helped out. But then there's all the stuff that goes along with tracking the inventory, and then doing gunsmithing. So we provide gunsmithing service. You're checking stuff in. You got to check stuff out. Growing the employee base quickly, which means there's a learning curve for folks, which means they can make mistakes on acquisitions, dispositions, paperwork, which can be costly from a business standpoint if we get an audit. But we've got phenomenal people, and they do a very, very good job. In fact, we've had 2 ATF audits so far, and we pass with flying colors every time. I mean, they go on and on about how well our paperwork is, how well our firearms are tracked in our bound book and stuff like that. And so, that's all due to employees that actually care.
I think it falls back into you commented earlier about you're a systems guy. You're an organizational guy. Yeah. That's going to fit right into that. So you made a comment earlier about being across the street from Turner's, and we talked briefly about that the other day. I think it was a brilliant move, being right across the street from your main competitor.
It's just luck.
Yeah, it worked out very well for you. I just think more and more businesses should look at that. Go right across the street from your competitor. You obviously know you're going to do it better than them, and I think it's obvious that you do. And I think what you're hiring over there is really good. So, like I said, I was just that part. I wish more folks could see that.
Yeah, you're leveraging traffic. The most common question we got is, man, is it tough being across the street? And it's because it can be counterintuitive because Turner's is a big brand,
Well, they're big corporate,
and so, but it's foot traffic, man. Like my buyers are pulling in across the street, and I have a 28-foot banner. So right when they walk out of that door, they see, oh, what's a Dirty Bird? Now open to the public. What is that? I'm gonna go check that out. And so we had some foot traffic from day one, and then of course, we're everywhere. We do a lot of involvement in charity organizations. That was a new part of it, but I got that from Dave Plivlich. He was my mentor, and he taught me a lot about advertising and marketing. And one thing about Bakersfield, it's a good old boy community.
Yeah, it's definitely saw that. And that's what actually attracted me to you is I saw your sign popping up at a couple events and the train robbers. Like I said, I brought that up the other day. And I just, anytime you're going to support a local group, local team, whatever you're going to do, and you guys are local, I think that's highlighted pretty well. And I'll always highlight that every chance I get. I'd rather everybody buy local if you can. The money that goes through that store stays here. Right. The money that goes to Turner's goes to San Bernardino or Fresno or wherever their corporate is. So, but like I said, I like the local aspect. Being in California, there's been a lot of different aspects. With owning an AR-15 is not the easiest thing in the world in California. It seems like, it seems like it's legal, then it's not legal. It's legal, then it's not legal. There's so many different rules, and I think there's a lot of confusion on that. Yeah. Can I help enlighten us a little on the idea of owning an AR-15 in California?
Sure. ARs I'm very familiar with, because it's our background. I joke with people when I go into the store. I'm like, you should let people want to work with me, but I'm like, you should let me get one of my employees if you want anything other than an AR, because they all know more than I do about these other guns. And so, most of them have great knowledge. A few of them are like gun encyclopedias. I mean, it's incredible how much some of our people know. We've got our team does a bang up job. I mean, I can't say enough good things about them. But in terms of compliance for an AR-15, to get back to your question, it's not difficult to make an AR compliant now. So, kind of the background of AR compliance is that, when I got into the business, it was a bullet button thing. Okay. So you could have an AR, but you had to have a bullet button on it. And basically what they were doing is they thought it'd make the gun safer if you weren't able to quickly change magazines. That was the whole point of the bullet button.
Right, I remember that, yes.
And so, but people just put a bullet button on there, and, that was that. And then for folks that, are wanted to push it a little bit, they would come up with tricks. So maybe they've got a tool they strap to their finger or something.
Yeah, you can just pop it in, pop it out.
Right. Or there's a magnet,
yes,
or something like that goes. So there was all sorts of different workarounds for it. And so California had, when the assault rifle ban back in it expired in 94 or something?
Yeah.
Or it came on in 94, expired in the early 2000s.
I can't even remember. It's been up and down
California
so many different
passes
times.
this bullet button thing, and so all the guns have bullet buttons now. And then they just, they keep passing more laws about the ARs. And so the next thing they did was permanently fixed magazine configurations and or featureless. And so what that means is now a bullet button is not enough because that's not considered a fixed magazine. The definition of a fixed magazine is something you need to separate from the upper and lower to remove. Okay. And what's really unfortunate, about them doing that, making that change is that's assuming that everybody who owns one of these guns actually follows your BS laws and actually has the time to go out and then spend the money to change their firearm that they probably never shoot anyway.
Yeah.
be compliant. And what are they if they don't do that? Are they a felon now? Is that what it is?
I think they create a lot of felons.
So it did. And I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of changing laws in a way that, it's not backwards compatible, basically, to borrow a software term. It's not backwards compatible. So then a lot of folks either had to change or they just ignored it, But, an interesting thing about incentives is, I'll give you an example with the CCW law that came in. So, why am I spacing the case name?
Is this the SB2 recently,
No,
or
it's the Supreme Court ruling. But oh my gosh, why can't I think of it? I've talked about it a million times. I'm just drawing a blank on it. But anyway, the Supreme Court affirmed that, having a concealed carry permit, that a jurisdiction shall issue. Right?
Oh, yes.
And in California, a lot of places, you had to have what was called a good cause statement. So you had to write a letter. You're CCW.
Oh, yeah. You had to write the letter explanation,
And they're going to look at it, and they're going to... Now, in Kern County, it was a little bit easier, but in Los Angeles County, it was basically like, unless you know somebody, you ain't getting a CCW.
Right.
And so that is obviously unconstitutional. And so we finally had a reasonable makeup on the Supreme Court. That case goes through. And then what California and several other states, by the way, several other blue states, they decide they're going to essentially kind of abide by it. And so they're saying everybody is a shall issue. But then at the same time, we're going to broaden these gun-free zones. And we're going to say that pretty much any public places you can't carry. And so it makes it useless to have a CCW at that point. And so what my point is that the questions for me, because this happened while I was in the business, so I witnessed it. The questions went from being, how do I get my CCW? What do I need to do? To, is it worth it to get my CCW? Because if someone is concerned enough about their personal safety and protecting their family enough, and they trust themselves enough, and they know they're not going to go out and get drunk and carry, and they're not going to be an idiot, well, if your permit's no good anyway, but you're going to carry, well, why get a permit?
Yeah.
Okay, so why do the training? Why do the qualification? And so it's a problem with incentives. You essentially make it so folks who are law-abiding citizens, who are subject to piss-poor policies that are making the streets less safe every single day, if they're safety conscious and they're security conscious, they're going to carry. And now all of a sudden you're incentivizing them to just say, screw it, I'm not going to get a CCW.
I think a lot of it is in what I've always felt, and that is in our particular government here and the other blue states, is let's make it as hard as possible so more people just won't do it. And it's like you said, the more obstacles you put in the way, people are just going to back away from it. And there's some of us that are always going to carry regardless, but there's a good amount they're going to go, I don't want to take that chance. It's just not worth it. And I think that was realistically our governor, for one. I mean, no, that was definitely his goal. And I think he's led right into that with this latest 11% tax increase. That I think, in what I look at that as, I think that hurts lower and middle income. And you think about all these different taxes that jump in, and had to add more headaches for you guys. But also, I think that's going to hurt folks that really can't afford it. Say that single mom that have 3 kids, that she wants to have a firearm. She needs to be proficient with it. She needs to get out and train. So she has to have ammo to go out and shoot. Now she's got to add another 11% on top of buying the gun and the extra ammo. So she's really not practicing, and eventually she's just not gonna have it anymore. And now she's unsafe.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. You're 100% right. That was my initial reaction as well. And in fact, right as this law was taking effect, one of the news stations came down, and that was exactly the point I made to them. I looked in the camera. I said, Democrats hate poor people.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Because I mean, how else would you consider? Because like, it's not going to matter to us. Well-to-do. Well-to-do folks, they're not bothered. They're gonna get their gun.
Absolutely.
They're gonna go out. They'll pay the 11%. It's not gonna hurt them. It's 100%. Just like you say, it is hurting the folks that aren't privileged, that are in bad neighborhoods. I mean, you're in low-income neighborhoods. That's where you really need a gun, right? And you're gonna make it and they tried to pass a manual registration law where you had to pay a registration fee, basically like the DMV, every year for your entire collection, for every gun you have.
I remember that, the talk about that.
And
exactly.
they want to, and they really want insurance. They want you to carry insurance too, right? And so what that does is it makes it a privilege of the wealthy, okay, which is anti what they claim, and what's kind of, it's like, not to get too much on a tangent, it's the exact same thing with their energy policies.
Oh, very much so.
They'll add gas taxes just because they don't want people driving. They feel like, well, we're going to make it too expensive. Well, here's the thing. You're making it a privilege of the wealthy.
Yeah.
Okay. You're hurting the folks they're living paycheck to paycheck. You're debasing their currency. So their dollars are worth less.
Yeah.
And then now you're raising taxes on them that are going to affect them disproportionately. Oh, and then in, 2035 or whatever, they have to buy an electric car.
Yeah. Good luck with
Are
that.
you kidding me? At what point are those people just going to give up and say, and then what happens is that there's no incentive at all to work at that point.
No.
The state is going to have to subsidize every aspect of that poor person's life, and they're going to. It's poor policy decision after poor policy decision, and so going back to the AR thing, at what point are folks like, you know what, I'm just going to take the bullet button off?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
And
why worry about it?
Not that I condone that or anything, but I'm just telling you what the general attitude is, and it's kind of common sense. It's like, well, if they're going to come out next year and make this new compliance tool, like if they're just going to keep doing that, well, are you going to pay a gunsmith, or are you going to buy the parts every time and take the time to swap this stuff out on your gun, knowing darn well that you're not even going to use it at this point? Or are you just going to get rid of it, or are you going to just make it regular? Hell, why not put a short barrel upper on it while you're at it, if you're going to be a felon no matter what? And so misaligned incentives, punishing the wrong people. I mean, it's just it's the Democratic Party platform right now, unfortunately.
It is. I think back to my youth when I was growing up, and a single mom, and there were 6 of us, 6 kids, and what she had to go through. And if she was in this time zone, this era, it would be so much harder for her. She could have never been able to make it, and we would have struggled so much, and we did as it was. But at the same time, looking back and what it was like then, I can't imagine what it would be like nowadays. But like I said, it really does just hurt those folks. One of the things that I hear a lot out there, and we talked about it real briefly, and we'll just cover it real quick, is this gun show loophole. We know in California that's not a reality, but I'm sure you guys hear that at times. I hear it out in the street for people that are just misinformed. Do you get that in your story every once in a while, folks coming in, or definitely liberals, in my opinion, get a little lost on that one?
Yeah, I don't personally get that too often. I do hear it mentioned in the store sometimes, I suppose. Yeah, you're right. In California, there is no gun show loophole. Even private party transfers are required to have a background check. In some states, that is a thing, where private party transfers are loosely, if at all, regulated. And I don't really have much of an opinion on that. I actually don't see the huge problem with that. I've never really identified where these super strict gun control laws are actually helping prevent gun violence any more than, say, a better crime prevention would, So you're putting the cart before the horse by adding more gun regulations. First of all, they're not good at enforcing the gun regulations we have. For example, I've been audited by the ATF twice. The DOJ has not audited me once. They have twice as many laws as the ATF, and I haven't even met face to face our agent. And I think it's changed 2 or 3 times before we even started. When we started, there was no agent for our region. And so, again, it's politician passing laws for votes or for looks, and not at all considering the implications of the administration or enforcement of these laws. That tax you mentioned is another example of that. I'm required to collect these taxes, right? Cheyenne, shout out to Cheyenne. She's our compliance officer. She's phenomenal at her job. I mean, even she's frustrated. She's joining these webinars. She's trying to call the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, get information about this fee. We haven't even seen the form we're supposed to fill out.
It was just the idea of let's add more taxes, let's add more fees.
At this point, I cannot file a return for those excise taxes we collected. And so, I mean, you can imagine the frustration. You're saying, because we feel like there's the sword of Damocles over our head, because if we get it wrong, they're going to come fine us and all this other stuff. But at the same time, we're not getting the guidance we need to be enabled us to administrate the program properly. Not to mention it's BS from the get-go.
Oh, absolutely.
But if you're going to put it on us, at least give us the tools we need to actually, report what we're collecting. And so, yeah, so the gun show loophole, I guess it's a thing in some states, not something here.
Yeah, not a reality here. And that was kind of what I wanted to make sure that I hear it up and down the state, because in my regular day job, I'm up and down the state, and I hear that an awful lot. It's like that's not a reality. So I wanted to just kind of get that out a little bit. The fact that you have to have a full-time compliance officer.
Oh yeah.
And that's just adding more and more regulation to you, more and more payroll.
Yeah.
Make it a little more, I would imagine in other states, they don't have to have it as much.
Actually, I have a full-time compliance officer, and then she has an assistant that helps her double check paperwork. And I'm not joking. Two 40-hour-a-week employees.
And that just add more and more expense to small business.
Yeah, well, and that makes us, as we came into this market with money, okay? So I was able to dump money into advertising to get our revenue up, to donate guns to charity events, to get out there and capture as much of the market share as I could. The home FFLs, which used to be a very prominent thing, especially in this area, they can't do that, nor do they want to. For a lot of these folks, it was the part-time gig for them. They don't, so unfortunately, I guess fortunately for us, it's consolidating. It's the opposite of decentralization, which is what I think the goal should be. And it's concentrating power into fewer and fewer businesses. And when in reality, it should not be like if you're regulating a constitutional right to the degree that it makes it cost prohibitive for someone to do or exercise, so either exercise as a user or exercise as someone who wants to take part in the business aspect of it. If your regulations are so burdensome as to not allow that, then you've got a problem. You that is undue burden, and it's unconstitutional any way you look at it. You don't have to like the Second Amendment to understand that is a fact of life here. And the Supreme Court has made it very, very clear that, it's a pretty black and white issue now. It's been reaffirmed over and over again. And what you have is a bunch of courts in open revolt against the Supreme Court and, all this stuff, safe handgun roster, magazine capacity ban, the high cap magazine ban. There's a ton of laws that have already been overturned by federal judges in California that said this is not constitutional. But then they get hung up in the Ninth Circuit. And, they do this en banc thing and appeals. And so you've got a magazine ban, high cap magazine ban that was tossed out years ago as unconstitutional. And it still hasn't made its way through the court system so that we can sell people standard capacity magazines. It's insane.
Yeah, we see that. There was that time where it seemed like you would have it, then you wouldn't have it. Then you'd have it. It was where you could buy it for this 2-week period, and then you couldn't buy the 30-round magazine or this or that. And now, like I said, the politics, I think we're going to see some changes coming, or there's going to be some push to change the Supreme Court actually, and expand it to where we can see more and more changes come back that they're going to be very detrimental to us, folks that I think that support the Second Amendment. I know our current administration doesn't agree. We only need 9. Let's add 15. Let's add, yeah. Even though that packing the court aspect is going to be the next step that they're trying to do that. But we'll see if that really happens. So in that, I mean, you've obviously taken what impressed the heck out of me. You've taken it from where you were to where you are now. Where's your plan? Say, where's the next step for Dirty Bird? Where do you want to see that in 5 years?
I'm pretty passionate about arming people in California. The more they try to crack down on people, the more I want. And it's it's a catch-22 because part of me wants to say, screw it. I'm shutting it down. I don't want to deal with this stuff. This aspect of the business is way less profitable than our online distribution business. But now I've got over 25 employees here to think about, and I've got a lot of customers who have shown us a lot of love here in California. And so my overriding thought is, screw that. We'll play by the book. We will do what we can to support a lot of the great organizations that are fighting against these asinine laws. And I would like to open more brick and mortar stores in places that don't want them, to be frankly honest with you. I want to go over the coast. I want to go over to the coast and open some Dirty Birds over there and support the people over there, because there are folks over there that they want to have a gun store, a local gun store they can go to, And so I think that there's an opportunity, for brick and mortar locations in California. We are constantly expanding our online business in terms of, we were expanding into complete firearms and ammunition, which is a much more competitive space. AR parts are pretty competitive, but that's our gig. So we're trying to break into the complete firearm and ammunition market, and that's been going fairly well for us. And as far as that aspect of it, as far as Dirty Bird goes, that's pretty much it. Of course, now I have a development team. We have location order routing, so you can buy online, pick up in store now. Like a lot of the stuff that the bigger companies are doing as far as being able to fulfill orders. You go to one website and it'll pull our inventory for all our locations. And if we don't have it in North Carolina, go ahead and buy it. We'll ship it out from Bakersfield. And so yeah, that's what we're doing.
I was actually at an event, because you talk about seeing more and more people armed, it would have probably impressed you watching these guys. I was actually at a stock dog event up in Wyoming. And I don't know if you've ever been to one of those, but it was and they had the juniors there. The juniors were doing their dogs and working the cattle. And then they did an auction that night for 4-H and FFA kids, or the money was going to their scholarships. Well, there was 5 guns that were being auctioned off that night, and 4 of them were 22s or smaller guns like that. And the 4 22s they actually were auctioned off were all bought by different dog trainers and then donated right back to the kids, the juniors who won first, second, third, and fourth. Mm-hmm. And that impressed me a lot. And that made me think about that a lot. We got to get the youth more and more involved in being comfortable around handguns.
So that's another law that California passed. I don't know if you're aware of that. They made it illegal to do any marketing that involves children at all.
Is that right?
And so yeah, we sold Dirty Bird shirts, kids' Dirty Bird shirts. I made them because my kids wanted some and people liked them, so we were selling them. I can't sell them anymore. And yeah, so they used to teach gun safety in schools, believe it or not. And so it was a lot safer time back then, and so and if here's the thing, the fact of the Second Amendment isn't going anywhere. They know this. Okay. By right. They, I mean, gun control advocates and, anybody who's basically anti-gun. Well, you're in the United States. That is a constitutional right. It's not going anywhere. And probably the most effective argument they have, the one that touches my heart the most, is the examples of children getting hold of guns and shooting themselves or siblings or other kids. Because it's a tragedy. It does happen far too often. But, if you're really concerned about that, well, you're going to make it more difficult for me to do a nonprofit gun safety thing to help, folks and children to understand about guns, because that's what it is. It's ignorance. It's ignorance.
Well, that's all it is. Big part of it.
And then, so yeah. And again, it's one of these things. They say one thing, they do another. They want to disarm the population. That's, that they'll use the kids' argument as an excuse to disarm the population. But as far as actually doing something to help prevent accidents when it comes to firearms, they're not interested.
Well, and most of the folks that are really out buying firearms are the ones that, my kids were raised up around them. They learn not to touch them. My grandkids are raised up around, they learn not to touch them and then when they do learn, they're learn to be proficient. My daughters, obviously learn to shoot very young, and they shoot very well. My son obviously is well into it. So it would shock folks to know if you went to North High right now, underneath their auditorium, there's actually a shooting range.
It's wild. Yeah, I didn't know that. I had Craig Powers was he had mentioned that. I had brought him with me on the Terry Maxwell show, and he mentioned that. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. What look at how far we've come.
Oh yeah, that's my father-in-law. When he went there, they actually used to go down there and they would shoot 22s. And do, of course, archery, but then you'd have the long guns. Yeah, that's crazy to think of how safe it was, and now that nobody's really around them anymore. Well, that's really good. Like I said, the fact you brought all the different laws up, different rules, regulations, I love what you're doing locally. I more and more folks, we need to do that. Take care of the local aspect. I think 4-H definitely, you can still shoot there. I don't know if you've seen that much, and I'm sure you get some of the 4-H kids. They can actually still have they can shoot bolt action 22s. That's all they could shoot, single shots.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great place to start. One of my favorite ways to shoot is in sporting clays.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. I think skeet and trap and sporting clays is a ton of fun. You can get a full ride scholarship to do it to a good school.
Oh yes.
Shoot and trap, sporting clays. And unfortunately, students in California are at a disadvantage. You know who's usually great at that? Women, young girls.
Yes, yeah.
Phenomenal shooters. Okay, but the young ladies here in the state are at a disadvantage because there are very, very few programs that would allow them to get to that level. So it's basically either their parents, invest the time and money, which a lot of them do, and a lot of them raise some very, very talented shooters, but. It's another thing.
And we got a couple of good opportunities here for them to go out and shoot that in Five Dogs, and then there's the gun club out there at Buena Vista, I think, where you could shoot skeet.
Bakersfield's a phenomenal community for all that stuff. We're blessed to be in this little island of, first of all, philanthropic people.
Yes.
Bakersfield. Everybody's got a charity that's near and dear to their heart here, and I know a lot of guys that have a lot of money. Okay, there's a lot of money in this town. And I see him at all these charity events buying raffle tickets for guns they don't want or need,
right?
Just to give to the, and a lot of times they'll win it and donate it back to someone else. So that's one thing that's one thing I love about this town is there's a lot of good people around here. And I really wish, I hope, and I pray that we can get California back on track and, get some common sense up in Sacramento.
I'm hoping with everything going on, we're going to start seeing a little bit of a shift. I know it's going to be tough, but it would really be nice to see some type of a shift. Now, I think, we didn't talk about this in advance, but that, we're coming on this right after the attempted assassination. And there's going to be, I was surprised that we have not heard more going against, out there for gun control after that. I don't know why.
There's been some stuff,
but not much, like it was a different type of shooting. And I think that should show people a little bit of, it was amazing how quiet the folks were because of who got shot. Mm-hmm. I think had a lot to do with that. And then there was a lot of talk about how he was shooting an AR. Mm-hmm. Then I heard today it might have been something different. There's just not a lot of information about that. So it's kind of nice to see that we haven't seen more gun control. But I do wish that folks would look at it and see whose name was on the majority of those gun control laws when they were coming through the Congress and the Senate years past.
Well, again, I mean, what are they going to say? None of their proposed gun control laws would have prevented this shooting.
Not at all.
And that happens time and time again. These guns are purchased legally, oftentimes by parents of these shooters, and they're either derelict parents or they're really troubled children. And, when on Monday I had a lot to talk about on the show, and so I went over the fact that there's a lot of the initial reaction to that shooting, that the gut instinct is that they had something to do with it, they being whatever you want to call them, deep state exactly. Actors, whatever, rogue intelligence. But because of all the different ways they've gone after him, and they're getting pretty close to the election. And so, but regardless of whether or not it was a lone gunman, it's still the point stands that there are forces arrayed against him, and it's undeniable, in terms of censorship. I don't know if you guys know this, but in 2020, so the two most censored events in human history were COVID and the 2020 presidential election.
Yes, very much so.
By a long shot.
Yeah.
And the tools by NGOs that are basically, 1 degree separation from intelligence agencies that use the, Cambridge Analytica and these censorship tools that they deploy against people. All this stuff was developed for use to provoke color revolutions in other countries.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we overthrow dictators. We don't have to go in there with our military. It used to be we operate out of the embassy. You go and get some revolutionary groups, bing, bang, boom. Okay. We install some puppet. Okay. But, right after the 2016 election, that's when they started turning some of that stuff towards to use on the American population. And so we're never going to know what the details are. I mean, it's going to be so obfuscated about this assassination attempt. We still don't know JFK, but everybody kind of knows.
Yeah.
The same thing with Martin Luther King. Everybody knows that it was, the government involvement in his assassination. There's been books written on it. There's been co-conspirators come out and say, yeah, but the official line is no. And so we're never going to know, but what we do know is that there are certainly powerful people with the incentive to take an action like that. And so what it really was, we'll never know, and does it really matter?
Not really.
They're still dishonest. They're still acting against the will of the American people.
Yeah, very much so. Well, I think we covered quite a few things. Is there anything that here we didn't cover that you would like to lay out?
No. Man, you wound me up. I talked for a while, huh? dirtybirdusa.com. You can check us out, or ar15discounts.com. That's our other site. Or if you're in Bakersfield, come see us. You can buy online, pick up in store, all that good stuff.
That's outstanding. Like I said, we all know where you're at over there on Mohawk, so definitely jump in there and see your guys and, talk to your employees. Like I said, they were on top of it. They were it was great to see. So thank you for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. Maybe we'll do it again.
Rock on.
Thank you, buddy.